Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Scrutiny on Tuesday, November 12th in the Walton Suite, Guildhall, Winchester. It's 6:30. I'm Councillor Caroline Brooke and I'm chairperson of the committee. Some housekeeping points, as always. Please ensure mobile phones are on silent or switched off. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed and will be on the council's YouTube channel later. In the event of an emergency or need to evacuate, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow instructions from the team. I'd like to welcome members of the public. We don't have any. I'd like to welcome everybody to the room. Please note that item 9, the acquisition of affordable homes, contains an exempt appendix. So when we get to that, I'll ask you if there's anything exempt you'd like to ask about, and then we'll propose to move into exempt at that time, if so. When we finish with the exempt paper, we would, of course, come back into open session. As you can see, there's a substantial amount of business on the agenda this evening, so it is planned that all items will be addressed. However, in the unlikely event the committee cannot conclude all of its business, the committee may decide to adjourn to another suitable date. In advance of this, we have been looking for alternative dates and not been able to find one because I was aware that this was a monster and we might not get to cover it all. So we've suggested all different options that have been looked into. So my apologies for that size, but I think all of the papers are important that we look through. However, I do think that we need to prioritise. So Councillor Wallace and I disagree on what we should prioritise. So I'm throwing it out to the group. I think our priorities for this evening should be item 8, item 9, 9A and item 10. But I'm throwing it out to the room whether you also agree with that or not. Anybody like to say yay or nay? Councillor Reach.
I'm fairly circumspect, but I think item number 6 is very important as well, the medium-term financial strategy, since that sets the scene for most of the other decisions.
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I would agree. Item 6 and also item 7 actually, because there are some changes in the HRA this year, so I think that's important as well.
So nobody's spoken out about Q2 performance monitoring, and there will be a new report on that soon. So if we make sure that that paper is last, so that if we don't get to it, we can adjourn. And what I would suggest then is that if we could, sorry, can we stop talking at the back? Thank you. If we can be as concise in our questions and the answers as possible, team, that would be very much appreciated, to see if we can get through as much as possible. Councillor Bolton, did you want to speak?
Just to clarify, what constitutes not getting to a particular item on the agenda?
In an ideal world, we wouldn't go on longer than 3 hours. If we end up at 10 o'clock, I will draw things to a close. So let's begin. So as the agreement is that the MTFS is very important, we shall start there. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Thank you. Do we have any apologies from members this evening, Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So we've got apologies from Councillor Clear, who's been replaced by Councillor Cromoisen. Apart from that, all other members of the committee are present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Wallace.
My normal one as a county councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Cromoisen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this counts as an interest, but better safe than sorry. I am the chair of the Kings Barton Forum. I don't think it's prejudicial and I don't think it's pecuniary, but should at least declare it.
Thank you, Councillor Cromoisen. Chairperson's announcements. That mine was really about the agenda this evening, and my apologies for that. So coming on to item 4, minutes of the meeting of the 14th of October 2024. Can the meetings from the last minute be agreed and signed as a correct version of the events? Agreed. Lovely. Item 5, public participation. So Councillor Lee has registered to speak on all agenda items, and Councillor Hurrell and Councillor Godfrey, you're both speaking on separate items as well, I believe. Sorry, councillor Horrell, you're speaking on items. I can't remember which one councillor Godfrey is off the top of my head. 6. And councillor Horrell, you're on all of the others, aren't you? Yeah, thank you. Would you like to come up at the start or would you like to speak as the items come along? Okay, right, so coming on to item 6, the general fund budget options and medium-term financial strategy. It's recommended that committee scrutinise and comment on the proposals within the attached draft report, Ref Cab 3483, which is to be considered by Cabinet in its meeting on the 20th of November. Councillor Cutler, I believe you're introducing, and we have Ms Keys and Mr Aitken in the room who will also be answering questions.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the process of developing the general fund budget proposals for 25-26, we always bring forward a paper in the autumn setting the scene and describing the assumptions we will make and the challenges we face in setting the budget. Local government continues to suffer a crisis in funding following years of reducing funding from central government. Since 2020, we've been told that government is intending a fair funding review that will include resetting business rates, ending new homes bonus, and remaining revenue support, but at the same time giving the certainty of a 3-year settlement. Every year the can has been kicked down the road with a 1-year settlement very late in the year and no long-term settlement. In this respect, this year is no different. Government has said there will be a 1-year settlement. Hopefully we'll get it before Christmas, and that there will be reform and a longer term settlement next year. However, this new government is committed to better funding of local government, but has made clear that with the appalling state of the public finances inherited from the previous government, increased funding will be on the basis of need. Therefore, it's wise to continue with the assumption that any longer term settlement will result in a reduction of core funding for this council, with a reset in business rates, a negative revenue support grant, and the end of the new home bonus in 26-27, mitigated by a forecast of damping these steep reductions over a 4-year period. These core assumptions, along with the assumptions for council tax and inflation, show a reduction in revenue resources available from 23.36 million in 25-26 to 19.62 in 29-30. So this paper sets out the council's approach to this financial challenge through the TC25 project at section 11. It sets the current forecast for this financial year at section 12. More details on government funding, council tax and inflation assumptions and fees and charges at section 13, and along with discussing the pressures on the budget at section 14. The paper also describes in detail our reserves and general fund capital programme, all of which feeds into the MTFS table as shown in Appendix 1. Members, this medium-term financial strategy and budget options paper and the assumptions underpinning it gives clear basis for the preparation of the detailed budget to be brought to Cabinet and then to Council in February. There are a number of recommendations for adjustments to the base budget to enable ongoing work on the food waste collection service to provide additional support for homelessness, as well as approving contract inflationary increase in the fees for the garden waste service, and to create a capital budget to enable transfer of section 106 funds to Wickham Parish Council. So I'm happy to answer questions along with Mrs. Keys and Mr. Aitken, who are here to support on this paper. Thank you.
Would either of you like to add anything before we go to the public?
Only briefly, Chair, just to re-emphasise a couple of those points around the pressures that the council continues to face due to increased service usage and the costs of delivering some of those services. And also just to mention that we continue to have that uncertainty around our long-term funding, which makes planning very difficult for the council. And obviously we wait with great anticipation around the settlement due in December, though the government has indicated that future funding will be allocated based on a deprivation on a need basis. So we don't know how Winchester will fare as a result of that. And as Councillor Cutler has said, this paper is primarily around getting approval for us to work up the detailed budget that we'll bring forward in February. So it's a step on that journey.
Thank you, Ms Keys. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward and speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Conscious of time, I'll try and keep this brief and quick. If the MTFS forecasts the Council's likely income and expenditure over the medium term, has the MTFS been correlated or calibrated against the emerging 2025-30 Council plan? Either way, I'm not sure how well that can be done as we're living in what I call the chicken and egg twilight zone until we see the final Council plan, the government budget detailed breakdown of any settlement relief, and amongst need for clarity on many known unknowns or assumptions, as I think Councillor Cutler has referred to them. The real concern is the options and MTFS in this paper don't consider the increasing importance of rebalancing the need between mitigating climate conditions with adaptation and resilience as raised at full Council and declared as being a feature in the Council plan. So can I ask, has that been considered? I guess whatever scrutiny drills into today should result in a strong health warning to the MTFS going forward. On the subject of cost drivers and opportunities, I note the invest to save for new capital projects are aligned with TC25, and as Councillor Cutler has mentioned, there's a 3 million a year efficiency saving to meet future challenges. Simple question is, how risky is the delivery of that, and how high is the confidence for the delivery? Question at para 13.5, probably for my own edification, but can clarification please be provided on how the business rates pool for Hampshire works? I see it derives an in-year 50% small business rates relief, with some business not paying any business rates at all. What does a pooling system provide? How does the pooling system provide this relief, and could it change? Additional government funds for homelessness could provide partial budget relief. I noticed a statement. Have we fully factored in the government's deprivation-based approach could admit any relief for us? And then talking about the waste, food waste collection, an additional 135k per annum, be it included in the ongoing costs for the provision of that service, and some other significant provisions. The costs for that seem to have grown. My concern is, does that mean that we are diverting funding away from other more optimal, greener, faster projects? Perhaps I should pick up on that at item 10. In relation to services, how many council contracts are up for renewal in the next 2 years? On what basis are they being inflated to justify the additional 50k per annum? What economy of scales and efficiency options are being considered through contract joint ventures with neighbouring authorities or other means? Are we really applying the widest angle, the creative horizon scanning thinking? A similar question applies to the digital transformation programme. Surely Winchester is not alone in the need to upgrade its digital services. There will be synergies and efficiencies to be had through joint programmes, as we do with Test Valley at the moment, to dampen pressures on the budget. And is the flatline 500k cost in the general fund earmark reserves for the 10 years sensible, or have I missed something in my understanding? Please help me clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Thank you for your comments and your questions. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm concerned that you don't think that the MTFS needs to be considered by scrutiny with any priority. I believe it is the most important paper this evening, because without finance, nothing else can happen. However, the paper before you does give you a bit of deja vu, I suspect, because all that's happened is government announcements have indicated that the uncertainty continues, and this is what makes it a bit easier to balance the books for next year, but we still have no idea what happens after that. The 5-6 years going forward look very similar to what was published this time last year. There is a cliff edge. There's a large expenditure hole of uncertainty. Where's the £17 million going to come from, which at the moment is forecast? And this is why the TC25 element of this report is something which I hope the Scrutiny Committee will look at in detail. Because unless we achieve the targets of this programme of £3 million per annum saving, recurring after the 3 years of the programme, then when the reset to business rates, when the new homes bonus, and when the other grant funding from central government ceases, then what is going to happen if TC25 has not delivered net savings? It's now 20 months since TC25 was formally launched, and we've seen some updates today, but I hope the Scrutiny Committee will be able to find time to look at it. If not tonight, then you will need to set aside time to consider how that programme is delivering the important savings. 3 years deliver £3 million per annum. 20 months has delivered £820,000 per annum savings. Less than 30% of the savings required, according to the paper before you. Is that enough? Is progress being made satisfactorily? Are we saving £820,000 a year on our net expenditure? The report is full of numbers. I did get the feeling, though, that some of the positive numbers were repeated frequently. For instance, the 30k a year increase in expected income from the garden waste collection because of the increased subscriptions. There's 4 mentions of that. It's listed in 4 different sections. But some of the negative news only gets 1 mention. The requirement to fund the implementation of food waste collection, £460,000, which has got to disappear out of our reserves. I would hope the Scrutiny Committee will consider whether or not the report gives due weight to both the pluses and the minuses. But we need to consider, though, if TC25 is genuinely the net figure that we're going to be dealing with, or is money just being moved from one expenditure to save money and recorded against TC25 and spent elsewhere? We've seen a number of items on this report tonight which suggest that we have to spend more money. The planning income is down, building control income is down, but that's not being decremented on the TC25 numbers. It should be, because we've got a bigger black hole to fill. So please look at the savings in the report and make sure that Cabinet consider the true picture of future finances and the challenges that the uncertainty delivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Cutler, would you like to respond to any of the points raised by Councillor Lee or Councillor Cutler? Councillor Godfrey.
I think the process, I don't quite understand the process with the Scrutiny Committee. I understood that the speakers spoke to the committee and suggested things that should be asked. It's very, very difficult as a cabinet member to take down a whole list of questions, in particular in Councillor Lee's case, and I'm quite happy to answer. I'm here to answer questions from the committee at the moment. Thank you.
Officers, do you have any comments to any of those at all? Any thoughts or responses to the 2 comments we've had on?
Chair, I'm happy to speak certainly with Councillor Lee for some of his more detailed questions around business rates pooling, for instance, and I think that's probably best done outside of this committee.
Thank you, I'm happy with that. Okay, so coming to questions from the committee. Councillor Cromwell.
Thank you, Chair. One of the questions I had will pick up on one of the points that Councillor Lee raised, which is in the area of food waste and the additional cost per annum for providing the food waste service. There's a sort of first part of the question is, can you just provide a bit of colour on why we need to provide that, and it's not covered by the new burdens funding that we're expecting. And the second part of that relates to the one-off budget. Perhaps if you could provide a little bit of colour around the thinking about the choice that's been made there, because there is a choice, and it's a tricky one to make. So a little bit of colour out in the public domain might be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, the ongoing expenditure is again, as I pointed out at the beginning, a lot of this paper is around a series of assumptions. And one of the assumptions we've had to make is that new burdens funding will only cover 80% of our expenditure. So that's the figure to top up that ongoing expenditure. The one-off payment is around the decision, which is in the food waste paper later, to implement food waste collection from October 25 as a phased delivery, which means that we will not get new burdens funding until the 1st of April. And that decision will be taken, or is intended to be taken in the food waste paper, on the basis that it will be the most effective way of implementing this process, so that by the 1st of April we have a fully functional and effective food waste system. The key to implementing food waste is for it to work from the word go, for people to be confident in it. That's when you get your maximum return in terms of the amount of food waste and people engaging in that system. So actually having a rolled out rather than a big bang approach was felt to be the most effective way of doing that. And there is a one-off cost to that. But given the carbon saving, and I think that's the answer to Councillor Lee's question as well, is that it's one of the most important mechanisms that we can use, ongoing reducing carbon in the carbon emissions in the district, if that is effectively rolled out and fully engaged by people. So we believe that by having that phased rollout, that will be the most effective way of delivering a credible system.
If I could just supplement you on that, please. So really the idea there is to try and get the carbon savings earlier, and also to ensure that the council is able to introduce the service smoothly, rather than having a cliff edge where all chaos reigns on day one because you're trying to do too much.
Yes, precisely. That was my that's the way to think.
Okay, who'd like to ask a question? Yeah. Councillor Bolton.
So seeing as we've got to this at this point rather than in the waste management section, I had a question around that similarly, that I hear what you say, it all sounds very sensible, but there's no cost benefit analysis that goes with it. And I wondered whether, I assume you must have done one to determine whether all of those benefits that you are retaining by going early are also a saving in cost terms.
I actually think it would be more appropriate to discuss that in the food waste paper, simply because this paper takes the figures that we are given by that to put into the assumptions for the budget, and so I think it's probably more sensible to approach it that way. But that's really down to the chair. If you want me to answer, or to ask Councillor Loney to answer.
No, that's fine. We'll cover it during the food waste bit if you're happy with that, Councillor Bolton. So please do make a note of that question and ask it again. Does anybody else have a question on the main body of the report? Councillor Batho.
It was just a clarification in terms of the garden waste in the
table on under 11.15, there's garden waste additional uptake of service of 30,000, but then there's also reference to the increase in fees of 30,000. Is it just coincidental that the two figures are 30,000 and that there's actually a 60,000 sort of benefit there?
It's entirely coincidental that there are that those figures are similar. The 30,000 increase is over what was budgeted for the income from garden waste due to the number of subscriptions. The garden waste service still does not achieve full cost recovery, and therefore, like all other fees and charges, is subject to the CPI increase. It's in this paper because we need to agree that now, because the subscriptions are due or become due at around about the time of the budget. We need surety that we're going ahead with it at this time rather than in the future. I think that's correct. Yeah.
Sorry, that's also just clarification of terminology or phrasing. In that table, it says additional uptake of service, which to me is additional bins that we're providing, as opposed to an increase because of service that the fee that the existing customers got. So is it just that there's the actual wording is sort of not correct, or is there two different income streams that we're looking to acquire?
If you can explain it better than I've attempted to just now.
So the 30,000 reflects increased subscriptions. So it's the number of bins that we're collecting and the number of new customers we're bringing on board who are paying for the service.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Firstly, thanks for all the officers' efforts in preparing this paper. It's always a complicated one, and it is a lot of really good information in it. And I completely acknowledge the points made earlier that there's a lot of uncertainty, particularly with the change in government, which does give us challenges. When I look at these things, I always try to focus on the biggest numbers. I think they're the ones who are driving this. In this paper, the biggest change is to do with the council's property assets. A £750,000 impact, which is a big impact on a £30 million budget, total budget. It's a big chunk of it. So we are there's a 750k swing. I know additional 250k per year for maintenance, and a reduction in 500k per year on rental. Now, this isn't the first time I've raised assets. In fact, I've been raising it for several months now, and where there is not much in this report about it. Maybe the right time. Maybe you can answer all the questions now, or are we going to ever get a briefing on assets? Because they're such an important part of the numbers that go into our general fund. It would be really good if we could get a briefing on assets and our strategy and what's happening there, because this is by far the biggest change in our budget. Thank you.
The figure in the paper is the risk over time to income from those assets. Again, we have to make assumptions of where there are risks, and one would hope that they won't arise. I think that's the question. That's the figures from the Estates Department of where there are risks where commercial property rents are higher now and there are leases coming up, and whether we will be able to achieve those same levels. So that's the basis of that figure as far as I understand it. In terms of a briefing on assets, I think you've raised this several times. I think there's something to raise with Councillor Todd, whose portfolio is asset management. It's actually quite difficult at times to go into a lot of detail publicly about commercial property, but there may be a mechanism that we can include. Obviously, asset management and management of the assets is a key part of TC25, and so therefore we're seeing some of those risks, but and incorporating them into the MTFS because we need to be prepared for a worst case here, but that gives us time to work to ensure that those extremes don't happen as much as we possibly, to mitigate them as much as possible. I think, don't know if Mrs. Key's got anything to add to that.
I would only add that that yes, asset management is a key theme within our TC25 programme. So we are keeping a close watch on all of those commercial properties and how we can generate the maximum amount of income from those. So perhaps as the TC25 is briefed out to members, then perhaps asset management can form some of the information that's provided.
Chair, may I suggest that this might be something that we want to either do request that comes to scrutiny or comes to a deep dive committee that we've talked about previously. It is, like I said, it is by far the biggest change to the numbers that we're looking at today. And for me, I feel as though I hear all the words and people are all saying all the right things, but it is driving a lot of our numbers, and I think we ought to invest. It's right and proper that we should be looking into this.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. I agree. We have brought this up many times, as Councillor Cutler said, and I still don't think we've had this answered to our satisfaction. So I would like to make that as a recommendation that we have a subgroup of the Scrutiny Committee who receive a briefing on assets and perhaps could even come up with some creative and interesting ideas that could feed into TC25. I think that would be absolutely right, and that's a good use of our role. Mr. Taylor, would we arrange a group for that after this meeting?
Yes, Chair. I think if we just take a moment to consider the numbers on that group and the makeup of that group, we can check the officer support, which would clearly be Mr. Hendy and Mr. Coe, and I'm sure the leader would wish to attend as cabinet member. We can perhaps agree a meeting to do that of a couple of hours. I would have thought should be sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a committee of 3, 6, 9 of us. I think 4 or 5 would be appropriate. Do I have any immediate volunteers for this? Councillor Wallace, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Laming, Councillor Batho. Okay, that makes sense, and then I'll attend as chair, and then that's the 5 of us. Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Bolton, you had a question.
Thank you. On page 25, I mean, I've got a few questions as it happens, but certainly the first one that I had on page 25, it sort of comes back to what Councillor Godfrey was saying about some of the numbers moving in and out or potentially in relation to TC25 and then reserves. And there's this beautiful reserve that appears on page 25 of 1.9 million to mitigate slower than expected recovery. Other uncommitted revenue reserves are available to support further increases to the projected deficit. I wonder if I could just understand a little bit more about how you trigger tapping into that type of reserve that in this report is very loosely phrased as, you know, something that's like pocket money sat back there in the sofa in case you need it. And it makes me wonder how we sort of recognise release of some of this type of reserve and what is part of TC25. And I'd love to just dispel some of the myth that exists in my mind, if not anybody else's. Thank you.
Chair, if I may, yes, so you're referring really there to two different sorts of earmark reserves that we have. So some of them are risk reserves. So we set up an inflationary pressure risk reserve, which is mentioned a couple of times within this report, which was all about how we can mitigate the risk of economic impact on the council. So impact of things that are well outside of our control. And so we set up that risk reserve, and that is there to absorb some of the impact on the council as it feels some of those additional pressures. Alongside that, we also have the transitional reserve, which I spoke at length about in the February budget report, where we are setting aside money specifically because we know we need to invest to transform the way the council delivers its services. So we set aside money when we know we need it in the future, and those two are slightly different, one being a risk reserve to mitigate against risks the council faces, and one because we know we need to invest for the future.
And sorry, part of my question was how you technically trigger 1.9 million. How do you release that for inflationary issues?
So we do transfers in and out of various reserves through the year and at the year end. So if we had experienced pressures that we've set a risk reserve for, we would use those to mitigate against that risk so that it wouldn't impact on our revenue budget going forward.
And that's your
yes, provided reserves are used for the purpose in which they've been set aside, then I can release those in accordance with the wishes.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to something Councillor Godfrey raised about the TC25. So we're 20 months in and we're just under a third of the savings. And there's various references throughout about just in case TC25 doesn't achieve its goals. At what point will you decide whether TC25 is actually meeting its goals and might meet its goals before you go, okay, we need to knock that on the head and move on to the next thing?
I don't think it'll ever be a question of knocking on the head and moving on to the next thing. Actually, TC25 is a process that we set up that has a series of projects running at the moment, which we the programme board looks at closely and looks at the RAG status of those and agrees where they're moving ahead quickly enough, where they're not moving ahead quickly enough, and what we need to do to keep things moving. But we also recognise that this actually will be an ongoing process because the original TC25 was set up to save 3 million. We actually need to save more than that, and we will need a continuing process. So once these projects that are within the TC25 process are in motion, most of which are, but some of them will take a longer period because they involve more change to a certain extent. We will keep this process and review the process and start a continuing, probably whatever we call it, whether we call it TC27 or whatever. It needs to be an ongoing process. I mean, the fact is, the process we've got at the moment, we have taken the areas that were implementable immediately, and that has made the 875 or 855,000 figure in the last 20 months. The other savings, a lot of the other savings are longer term projects, which we're in the process of scoping some of those, and as I say, we are monitoring all the time to check that we're on target. We do intend a briefing on TC25 probably in the new year for all members to give an idea of the range of what we're doing within it, and that will give some greater clarity. I think it is quite difficult to go into all those projects at the moment. Mrs. Key's probably got more to add here.
Before you answer, Mr. Keys, can I just say, just a shorter version from me is do we think TC25 will achieve its 3 million saving? And that's not the only question you answer, just carry on.
TC25 is now a tier 1 corporate project, so the monitoring of that is on the quarterly monitoring report, which comes to this committee and obviously onto cabinet as well. So it has that exposure. You can see the progress that the project is making, but obviously that's only been established as a tier 1 project and reported in that quarterly report for the last couple of papers. But yes, TC25 is making good progress, and we are on track to make significant savings. As Councillor Cutler has said, the ones that have already been achieved were the easier to achieve or required less time to recognise those savings, and significant investment will be needed for some of the larger projects to make some of the larger savings. But yes, it's making good progress.
Councillor Pat.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, having listened to everything that's just been said, I think I agree with Councillor Cutler that the 3 million target in TC25, okay, that's almost an artificiality, isn't it? Because there's a 3 million gap that's got to be filled, whichever way that's filled. And there also should be an ongoing search for ways of doing business more efficiently, more effectively, better digitisation, which, as has just been stated, is going to require a significant amount of investment. What slightly concerns me in the paper is that 1117, it does say TC25 secured total budget reductions of 857, which it says includes 250 at 1115. Well, the 250 at 1115 are all good, solid savings, which is, you know, cost reductions, which is great. But the additional uptake of, for example, the garden waste service, that's not a transformational project. That's not a transformational saving as part of TC25. I would suggest it is certainly a cost reduction that is to be welcomed, and we should be looking for more of those, of course. But that's on top of, surely, the TC25 target of 3 million saved through doing business in better ways, through digitisation, if that's what's required, or whatever. And we need both components of that. 3 million out of TC25 and whatever other cost savings we can generate elsewhere. I think the language in 1115 to 1117 could be a little more taut to reflect that.
Yes, and I agree that there can be some argument about what goes in and what goes out. The key thing is that we're making savings, and the total savings is what matters. The definition element of it, I think, is important, but at times that some things are sort of on the boundary, I suppose. So some things are still as a result of the TC25 process, even though they should have happened anyway. You know, it's that element of it which I think becomes quite difficult to, you know, we have the argument within various teams within the council and say, you know, that's not really TC25. You know, it's a saving that just needs to be made anyway. So, but to roll it up into that process of making savings, I think is quite an important mindset within the council, that, you know, you're looking for everything. And that is really part of the TC25 process. So it's a matter of definition. The important thing is that we make the savings.
Councillor Bolton.
I agree. It is important that we make the savings, but you can't bank a saving based on a lack of performance. So, you know, building control fees are probably down, are they not? Because building control requests are down. Planning applications are down. So, or correct me if I'm wrong in what's going on with the building control fee of 50,000. That's quite a chunky lump as a budget reduction. And you know, what's the reason behind that?
And that's another element of the strange way sometimes local government finance refers to it. We've actually had an increase in 50,000. So it's a budget reduction in costs in building control fees. But in another part, there is a reduction in the uptake of building control. So there is that's part of the day-to-day that we can't control within TC25. So it goes two ways. Actually, ultimately, we would probably say we won't have building control because it's not working that approach, or we will have the bare minimum. But the point was, we had a building control team. We increased the fees on the basis that it should have full cost recovery. But circumstances mean that we have, so that's that figure. And then circumstances mean that actually the uptake wasn't there. It would be the same with planning fees, which went in there as an increase due to looking at full cost recovery through TC25, but the number of applications were down. So yes, I can see Councillor Godfrey's point about some figures appearing to go in and out, but that's partly, one is the TC25 process. And again, we're back to the conversation or the question that Councillor Pett had, what should go in, what shouldn't. It becomes quite difficult. And the net figure is what matters. The savings we make overall is what ultimately matters. Mrs. Keats.
If I may, yes. So TC25 looks at, we're looking at transforming the way we do services to make ourselves more efficient, to improve customer experience. We're looking at reducing costs. We're also looking at driving income. So some of these changes are because we've driven more income, and we're looking to do that through our assets, the services that we deliver. The building control one is an example, as Councillor Cutler has said, we ran that at a cost to the council. So we've increased the fee income to try and make sure we have full cost recovery. And the result of that is that it has reduced the cost to the council, which is why it appears in this table as a saving. And it is complicated, but I assure you I thoroughly vet everything, and only if it is a genuine reduction in cost or increase in income do we count it towards TC25, because that's really important. It needs to be a very robust process so that as your Section 151 officer, I can say that we have got a sound medium-term financial strategy and a balanced budget.
Councillor Lamey.
Thank you. These figures relate to based on this year coming, but there are cyclical cycles in some of these, like planning applications and building control. Have you taken that into account as well over the period of the next few years?
Sorry, I didn't actually catch the question.
Yeah. Basically, what I'm saying is that a lot of these fees and that are on a cyclical basis, so they go down and they go up in a cycle. Have you taken that into account over the next few years?
I mean, part of the problem, planning fees is a great example. Yes, it is cyclical, and there is a problem towards the end of a local plan or before a new local plan. You get a reduction. Nitrates and nutrient neutrality has also caused a reduction, and the economy has caused a reduction. It's very difficult to judge and to make a plan based on it returning. Again, you can make some assumptions, but and I'm not sure that we do make assumptions that the planning is coming back. I think we're hoping that it will to some level, but again, the prediction's really difficult to make. The important thing is to try to make it that whatever level it is, we have, we're not losing money.
If I may just add in, wherever possible, we do look at cyclical trends. So, for instance, the cost of developing a local plan, that has peaks and troughs in it, so that I don't have swings of budgets all over the place every year, lots coming in and out all of the time. We have a reserve set up so that it can be a more constant effect on our revenue budget. But so wherever possible, we try and predict what the future year is going to be, but also looking forward at cost drivers as well. And an example of that, again, would be around the cost of asset management. So we've created that reserve so that we can use that reserve through the years, even when there's peaks and troughs in expenditure.
if nobody else has any more burning questions, I mean, by all means, take some offline, but Councillor Wallace just has one more and then we'll move on to the appendices and then hopefully the next paper.
Thank you. Yes, no, I've got a whole bunch of questions written down, but in light of time and other things, I think I'll take a load of them offline. I do want to make one final point. I think in section 15, it talks about the fact on reserves that you will be the plan is to review the reserves in more detail, and I'm trying to find the exact section. I made a note. Over the coming months, with a final report from on the robustness of reserves in February 2025. So is that, I was just going to check, is that report going to come here to scrutiny, or is it going to come somewhere else?
I think the intention was to review the reserves, and if there were any major changes to it, that would be part of the budget paper. And so it will come to scrutiny, it will come to cabinet, and it will come to council. I was keen that we stepped back and had a look at the reserves across the piece, and making sure we had the appropriate levels everywhere. I think it's partly because reserves are very often a rolling process, and it was just a stand back. So they just made the point that we were intending to do that. I mean, for example, here we discussed the exceptional inflation reserve, which was there really for contract unforeseen contract increases in year, you know, so that there was money to be released to cover that. Exceptional inflationary pressures are probably diminished, and we have suggested here that we move and create the homelessness reserve from that risk reserve, simply because homelessness is, as Mrs. Keyes was pointing out, we've put some funding in, but we know that the paper that on temporary accommodation the other day pointed out that yes, the median line predicted of the costs was 300,000 or so a year, but it could be 1 million. So by creating a reserve, we won't be sort of scrabbling around having to run a paper through a whole series of processes in order to release the funds when homelessness was urgent. And that's one of the reasons why we felt it was would be useful to look at the reserves across the piece, and if there were any major changes, to bring them forward as part of the budget.
Only to briefly add, Chair, that I am required annually to make a statement on the adequacy of our reserves, and I do that in our budget paper that comes forward in February. So ahead of doing that, as well as the proposal that's set out in this paper around homelessness prevention, I propose to do a full analysis of all of our reserves to ensure that they are adequate.
Thank you, Mrs. Keyes. Okay, coming on to the appendix, we've got the 3 appendices from pages 43 to 48. Do we have any questions on those, please? No? Okay. So aside from us having a subcommittee having a briefing around assets, which consists of Councillor Bolton, Batho, Laming, Wallace and I, that's the only action we have on this. Do we have any debate? No? Okay, so thank you for your engagement this evening on this paper. And we have scrutinised this, and by all means, as Councillor Wallace will, if you have any other less burning questions, take them offline with the Cabinet member and or officers. Thank you. So we'll come on to item 7 then, the housing revenue account, business plan and budget options. It's recommended that the committee scrutinise and comment on the proposals in the attached draft cabinet report, Ref Cab 3478, which is to be considered again at cabinet on the 20th of November. Councillor Westwood, if you'd like to introduce, and we have Mrs. Keyes and Mr. Harlow here to answer questions.
Thank you, Chair. Right, the budget for the previous financial year of 2024-25 was set against a background of high interest rates and designed to tackle inflationary pressures. CPI inflation has since fallen and reached 1.7% at September 24, below the Bank of England's target of 2%. However, this does not mean that costs have fallen. It means that the pace of increase has slowed down, and key cost drivers to the HRA, such as energy and building materials, continue to remain significantly high. The main cost pressures come from the following 5 areas. Firstly, continuing inflationary building supply and construction pressures, which are now baked in and continuing to increase broadly in line with inflation in 2024-25. Secondly, the capital costs of maintaining the existing housing stock at decent homes standard. The increased cost of repairs and maintenance following the determination earlier in the year found that cumulative RPI had not been applied in line with contract requirements. This increase, combined with increasing demand for repairs, is driving an increase in repairs and maintenance costs of roughly £1.1 million per annum. Thirdly, capital financing. Interest rates are a key cost driver in the HRA business plan, and as of the 31st of March 2024, the HRA had a capital financing requirement of £215 million, with a proportion of this debt needing to be refinanced over the next 15 years. Interest on borrowing remains high and is not expected to decrease significantly in the near term. Fourth, new homes viability. Stubbornly high Public Works Loan Board interest rates also mean that new homes viability remains challenging. As a result of the ongoing high costs, the Council has followed a strategy of acquisition, and as a result has been able to add to its housing supply between 2024-25 and 2027-28 through targeted acquisitions and acquisitions of Section 106 affordable homes. And fifthly, looking at the revenue side, the Council must set its rents in line with the rent standard and central government's regulator of social housing's rent setting guidelines. The current basis of rent setting is CPI plus 1% for 2025-26. The budget options contained in this report support the Council's commitment to increase investment in customers' homes, to go greener faster, to deliver 1,000 new homes programme by 2032-33, and to deliver an improved customer service and experience for repairs and maintenance. If no action were to be taken to address these pressures, there would be insufficient resources within the business plan to deliver a balanced budget over the 30-year planning period, whilst also delivering against our policy objectives. A savings target of £2 million per annum has been established to mitigate the pressures outlined above, and officers have been meeting on a regular basis during the year to identify and quantify potential opportunities. In addition, we will maintain our approach to service charges that those who use the services pay for it, but we will dampen any increase in service charge increases. To achieve these policy objectives and set a viable and sustainable HRA business plan, the budget options identified for consideration will be further developed and will be subject to consultation with customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. My machine.
Apologies, Chair. Can I just finish? Because I didn't turn to my second page. Just to finish, in addition, these budget options have been reviewed by TACT Board, which I think is important, and their feedback will also be taken into consideration. And the TACT Board were broadly supportive of the proposed actions, and the proposed options following development and consultation will be decided by Cabinet when the Housing Revenue Account budget is considered in February 2025.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Lee, would you like to speak? Bless you.
Thank you, Chair. So it's understood that the HRA is facing significant financial stress, and and there's resolve to deliver on the statutory focus to achieve EPC Band C, decent homes and higher housing numbers, whilst adhering to sustainability goals. But can I ask, please, can we be clear as to what we mean by sustainability goals? Sustainability is a much abused term with too often greenwash interpretation. I have a number of concerns and some questions. Can I ask, what is the big TC25 efficiency savings idea for the housing programme? I know we're talking about contracts, maintenance and repairs at item 8, because we do need to secure sustainable buildings of the future. Owners and operators of buildings must embrace change and fast. I'd like to highlight to scrutiny a Construction Innovation Hub paper, which is signposts to issues surrounding the implementation and adoption of digital ways of working, including building information modelling in local authorities. This could be a key driver for cost and efficiencies with improved service delivery, portfolio and life cycle planning and meeting net zero carbon target delivery. So can I ask if this digital way of working has been looked at? The business case for adoption is strong. Approaching the planning and operation of our states through more data-led approach could have significant positive impacts. And I note reading the paper that every 1% efficiency on capital delivery could save significant sums. Retrofitting buildings to achieve maximum energy efficiency beyond mere compliance is not as complex as it may first appear, especially when working alongside dedicated experienced solution providers. So I guess the question is, have we looked at the market for the best experienced solution partners? Digitization and electrification are redefining how building owners can operate and maintain their buildings. Retrofit buildings need solid technology foundations that enable data collection and visualization to drive informed decisions to improve energy efficiency performance. Digitizing decarbonisation efforts in this way helps streamline the management of aged facilities and to mitigate non-compliance of inefficient assets and systems while providing the capabilities to reduce OPEX through cost-cutting solutions and the ability to minimize unplanned maintenance on aging equipment, deteriorating building fabrics, etc. I really do believe we can future-proof our housing in Winchester with this type of approach. So can I ask for this to be explored, perhaps in the TC25 2025 programme? This council could pioneer a new way forward, and maybe with some provision in the housing business plan as a first stage consideration for this type of initiative. Innovating the black hole is not impossible. Moving on to some, and I think this is a transformational project and spend to save, and I'm happy to talk to the portfolio holder for housing. And I'm sorry I haven't done this before. It was a eureka moment, rereading some old papers. Some specifics. Good to see the wider environmental considerations made clear at para 7. As already said, mitigating climate and nature challenges with adaptation and resilience considerations should not be overlooked. Moving on to viability adjustments, I understand why there's a plan to shift from in-house construction to purchasing homes. However, this is worrying, as I believe it does limit the council's control over design and sustainability specifications in acquired units. While EPCs focus on the quality of the fabric and surface of buildings, they do not measure operational energy use. During energy crisis, where utility prices are at an all-time high, operational efficiencies is a challenge we can't ignore. The issue of energy performance gap, the difference between the predicted energy performance of a building as estimated by the EPC and the actual energy consumption in practice is real. In many cases, buildings don't perform as well as the EPC ratings suggest, resulting in high energy bills and carbon emissions. This problem with our intent will be exacerbated as we purchase homes from the market where these energy and carbon costs are higher than expected and can't be reduced through council's close oversight and necessary close. So can I ask, what is the plan to ensure we future-proof the quality of our future housing stock for occupants by taking this approach so we can include costs of management and repair and decarbonisation in an optimal way? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Horrell?
Chair, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to address scrutiny. On a general point, Chair, I just wanted to raise the fact that the length of the agenda this evening and the importance and the number of papers that you have before you, I question whether the commitment to scrutiny is as robust as it should be for this council. We seem to be curtailing some of the discussions because of time on some very important elements of council's business, and I would have hoped that there would have been better planning to allow full discussion for everyone. The HRA is one of the most important areas of the council's business and the delivery to residents right across the district. I have a number of questions that I'm not sure the portfolio will be answering, or whether these are for you, Scrutiny Committee, for you then to raise with the portfolio holder. In the first instance, one on new homes. When we discussed this last year, and this paper continues to make a commitment to new homes, which I absolutely welcome, but there is a slight change in the wording in terms of the rural aspect of new homes. We're clearly taking an acquisition strategy, but that takes us to more densely populated parts of the district. But I don't see the emergence of a rural programme and the homes that are desperately needed in some of our smaller communities. In the paper, we talk about a lot of the budget changes, and I just wanted to clarify with the 151, whether when we know the exact implications for us as a council, when some of those budgets are allocated, will that mean that there are absolutely more monies coming into this budget for the HRA, and do we have any idea on timings? Clearly there is still a lack of clarity on some of those allocations. In last year's budget, we talked a lot about service charges, both for wastewater, for sewerage, and service charges for tenants. What is very clear in this paper is what the rents will be for tenants, but we don't have clarity on the service charges. Suffice to say, full cost recovery is where we're heading. I actually think that's an important piece of the equation for our tenants. They may vary across different parts of our estate, and I think that it would be helpful if you were inquiring about those specifics, because there may be some impacts of some significance on our tenants. I also question the data point in terms of the budget, when we have a lack of condition data on our assets in the HRA, and whether that is a risk in terms of our understanding as to what will be needed in terms of repairs and maintenance, because I understand that we've got some 2 years to go before we'll have a full understanding of our stock condition data. And finally, Chair, a question in Appendix 2, which some of you, I hope, will be equally concerned about. One of the possible revenue savings indicated is the tenant involvement budget. But with the new regulator ensuring that there is a high level of tenant satisfaction and involvement, and asking us to do much more than we've done to date, I am concerned, and I have already raised this with the portfolio holder and the director, that we should not be looking to reduce our monies in this very important area as we try and build the new team of tenant involvement, the new housing board, and meeting the new targets that the regulator will be asking us to be measured by. So, Chair, some key questions for me that are not clear in this paper. Maybe they'll be coming in due course, but I hope the committee will see fit to raise some of them with the team this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. So coming on to the group, who would like to raise a question? Councillor Ash.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Horrell just mentioned regarding reducing the tenant involvement. wonder if just portfolio holder could explain what that entails, please.
Okay, Mr. Hendy, I don't have the actual numbers. I think you have those numbers to hand. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair. We have a budget of £100,000 on an annual basis to fund work with our customers in terms of tenant and resident engagement. That's not the funding that's put aside to fund our colleagues, our staff that provide the services, the additional costs of that. So this proposal in the report here, which we'll consult with our customers on, is to reduce that budget by £40,000. We'll still leave £60,000 a year to cover the work over and above the actual work of our colleagues in terms of supporting our residents.
If I may add to that, the tenant involvement and tenant engagement is absolutely the most critical thing we can do. And we have set up a completely new structure around TACT and the TACT board and the supporting consumer standards groups around those. And we engage with the tenants in so many different ways, not just through these groups, but regular surveys, as well as the in-person meetings, coffee mornings, etc., etc. And we engage through different lenses as well, whether it's on a safety aspect around community and fire and so on, or whether it's around what we're doing with our retrofit program. So it's a multifaceted piece of work that is done. And, you know, I am the last person that will take the money away from engagement with those people.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Councillor Wallace.
I'd just like to, firstly, I'd like to say, you know, thank you for the report. Lots of information there, and you can see it does give a flavour of how hard the team is working, not only to deliver for our customers, but also to address some of the cost challenges that we have. So thank you for that. I wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor Lee raised about the costs. We're obviously doing a lot of work to reduce the costs. That's clear in the paper. I do first, I guess, do we think, are we confident we can achieve the £2 million saving that we're looking for? And secondly, you know, is some of the data-led approaches that Councillor Lee was mentioning to improve efficiency, is that something else that we could be considered? Thank you.
Yeah, so to pick up on those two, I am confident that we will achieve the £2 million savings that we're seeking. And you have before you here, I think it's 16 different options that we are looking at, and each one of these will be continually worked on over the next few months until we bring the final budget paper back to presumably through scrutiny and through cabinet and to full council. These areas have already been discussed with the tenants through the TACT board, and areas of these are also discussed at the consumer standards groups as well. So in terms of confidence, I am confident that we will come back with an agreed approach to achieving £2 million savings. Whether it's this particular list, exactly this list, is still open to debate, but that will be achieved. And secondly, in terms of a data-led approach, well, anyone who ever sits in any of my meetings with the director will know that I approach all aspects of this job from a data-led approach, whether that's the engagement with the customers and how we engage back with and collect customer satisfaction, or whether it's down to the stock level data that we hold on our homes. A data-led approach is absolutely fundamental to the success of this business going forwards, which enables us to drive efficient and effective operational processes, enables us to do as Councillor Lee has asked, to use the data for predictive analysis on the stock and where failures may appear. It allows us to do location based analysis on what is happening with our stock, so that if you're getting, for example, specific problems that are showing in a state in Bishop's Waltham or something, then we can look at the stock in that physical area and so on. So a data-led approach is fundamental. Thank you.
Councillor Horrell's just step out for a moment. Councillor Bolton, you have a question.
I'd just like clarity on the revenue pressures. It came up at a previous meeting where you explained to me in terms of this historic RPI adjustment. But what I'm hearing, and I thought I understood at the time that this was a one-off issue, but this now implies that there's an ongoing problem or an ongoing cost associated with it, which I hadn't appreciated, and that might have been a mistake on my part. But could you explain to me why we've got an ongoing cost associated with it? And it seems to be it's $1 million, did you say?
Correct.
Yeah. If you
roughly.
Yeah, if you could explain what that's about and why that won't occur again.
That's fine. I will give my explanation. If the officers have any further detail and wish to add to it, then please, after I give my explanation, please add it. The contract with Cardo contained clauses around inflation increase, RPI increase, and the prices of work charged for a significant period of time, going back many years, had not been lifted by the RPI increase that was agreed in the contract. So this was came to light looking at the outturn for last year's budget when creating the reports for that. And there has been a retrospective payment made to Cardo for the work that was not charged at the correct price, which did not have the RPI increase associated with it. Now, that has had the effect of adding on to the prices that we are paying for work, the cumulative inflation for 10 years, right? So now the work that we're having done, the price point for that work now reflects the correct price based on the 10-year aggregation of inflation that had not been applied to that contract and those prices. Therefore, that has raised significantly the cost for items of work going forwards. And that's why it's an ongoing cost going forwards. Mr. Hendy, is there anything I've missed there? Thank you.
For how long?
I don't, to understand the question, for how long do you mean? How long will it continue? The contract runs up until 2026, and the next paper will talk about the re-procurement of that contract. So those prices are the prices that we have as a contractual agreement with an agreement that was negotiated more than 10 years ago with Cardo.
Thank you. I hadn't appreciated the ongoing. I thought it was one thing that had been dealt with now and we've paid the back issue, and that going forward it was no longer a problem, but I understand that.
Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank the portfolio holder for the paper and the welcome clarity compared to last year on the sewage treatment works piece. As I read it, and perhaps you could just confirm this for me, I mean, clearly this is of interest because many of the Winchester properties in Upper Bean Valley are reliant on private sewage treatment connections. We're seeking to limit the uplift for our tenants to the proposed Ofwat levels, but seeking to exercise full cost recovery on those services provided to private houses that happen to be served by our plants. Have I got that right?
Partially, if I can explain. The
sewage treatment plants that we own, I am now an expert for Mastermind to go on and explain the difference between a cesspit, a cesspool, or packet water works, etc., etc. And although I'm connected to mains drainage, I am now in that place. The price we charge for our services for any of the water treatment works that we own and operate, and I use that term that goes from cesspools through to proper treatment works, is increased each year in line with the Ofwat charges that are increased in the area, so Southern Water effectively. So that is that element of that, and the prices will be increased this year by that same level that is announced by Southern Water. And I believe that's not yet been confirmed, so we're waiting on that. The second part is full cost recovery. I was shocked to find that some cesspools need to be emptied on a weekly basis, and there is significant cost to that. Equally, there is a cost from Southern Water for depositing the residue that we may take and for disposing of that as well. So the full cost recovery on each of these plants is analysed and has been analysed, and we have the data down to individual house connection onto whichever plant they're connected to. Some of these connections are running at just about full cost recovery. Some of these are a million miles away from full cost recovery. So if you're emptying a cesspool every week and carting it off to Southern Water and disposing of it, you've got the tanker runs and everything else. I mean, you could be looking at several £1,000s a year simply to service a house, if it's one house on that connection. So with the sewage treatment works, the water treatment works that we own, the pricing is known to all, roughly, I think it's around about 1,000 connections that we've got. It's almost 50-50 private and council on that list. If you can think of it in three tiers, tier one is, well, it's close enough that we could move to full cost recovery, and we would be confident that we wouldn't shock people too much. Tier two is a banding where we would probably want to phase this in over a several year period to bring ourselves up to that full cost recovery, because the increase to deliver that is more significant than we'd want to give in 1 year. Tier three is where we go, well, we need to do something about this. So you will see in the paper, and there is a budget that I agreed at a cabinet meeting earlier this year to do work to upgrade a number of the more costly to operate water treatment plants that we own. And that work is currently being planned and will be executed by the end of this fiscal, so that we can drive down the cost associated with those plants before we look at the recharging. So we get as many as we can back to a sensible level of cost. And going forwards, we're still in consultation mode with this, and there will be more consultation with the people that are connected. And we will come back via the committees with our proposal for the way we want to move towards full cost recovery across that whole range of different connections that we have. So there's about 54 different plants that we own, and there are 54 different ways of cutting the numbers. So it's a complex process. Second, the other part that people don't realise is there are legal agreements in place. The legal agreements are possibly slightly different on each connection for the different plants, and there is a lead time on the when we can make changes to the pricing based on the legal contracts that we have with these different parts. So what's in the paper is factually where we are. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, and the intention is to bring that forward into not next year's budget, but the following year, with a full plan around those, having done some fairly significant upgrade work in the interim.
If I may.
If it's brief, because the
Very,
answer
very
is quite
brief.
long.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that our tenants, that there is still scope for greater protection, greater cost protection from them than there is for the private residents connected to those plants.
Our biggest concern is our tenants, to be frank. There is, I believe, one plant that is fully private, and we may look to sell that because we don't want to carry that burden forward. But we absolutely have to protect the tenants that we have in there. I can't turn around to a council tenant and ask them to pay a water treatment cost that's the equivalent of their weekly rent. It's unsustainable. And I've been, we've had some robust discussions about this in Simon's office, and that will not happen.
I just wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor Hall raised about new homes in rural areas. So we were, before we changed our direction, using rural exception sites to build homes in more rural areas. How will we now deliver homes in some of those more rural villages around the district?
Okay, we have not got rid of the rural exception sites and developing homes in rural areas. So in the presentation that was at my Cabinet Housing Committee meeting last week, there was a presentation by Caroline Egan on the new homes forward plan, if you like, as to how we will achieve the 1,000 home number by 2031-32. Part of that, achieving that number, is through rural exception sites. And it was also embedded in the housing strategy that we agreed last year, which Mrs. Knight led on that particular part. So the intention is to continue delivering into the rural areas, and it'll be done in a couple of ways. Firstly, through the rural exception sites process, which we we will be continuing. And the second is through working more collaboratively with parish councils and so on. So that was within the social housing, within the housing strategy paper, so that we do have that conversation, dialogue with the areas that are outside the main areas of development, and that we do build into those villages. The third aspect is that whilst I'm talking about viability today in terms of construction costs, which are unlikely to go down, but interest rates are likely to move. As and when that lever moves, that opens up more prospects for us to develop in locations where we own land in more rural areas. And we all know the number of sites that are there. And none of those sites that have been identified to date have been struck off of our list. We may have just red, amber, green them and said at this time, this is an amber site because we can't find the viability of that site is not there. That doesn't mean to say it won't change.
Any other questions on the main body of the report? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. It was just on the subject of the service charges. I too was interested to just clarify if we can see what they are, and the implication is that there's a move towards full cost recovery, but then the throwaway word at the end, increases are acceptable, or phrase at the end, made me think, oh, well, maybe there isn't a move towards full cost recovery. I wonder if you can clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, so the details of the service charges are available, and if the Scrutiny Committee wishes to see those, then I believe they can be made available. They're quite extensive on a spreadsheet. I have not seen them in that detail myself, but they are available. So if you want them, then you can have them. The service charges were capped 2 budgets ago when inflation was significantly high at 7%. And the job is to recover the ground on that. Equally, there have been changes in terms of energy costs and so on. So in terms of calculating these the service charges, some costs have gone up, but some costs have gone down. So our estimates for energy costs, for example, were too high. So we've reduced costs in that space. There are some, and we will move, and we are moving to full cost recovery where we can. We are capping it at 5% or £5 a week at this stage, so that we do not significantly increase any service charge above that level. But as we roll forwards, then we will increase back to full cost recovery. On the other side of the coin, then I do again have some robust discussions about looking at what is it we're providing and why is it that price? Because I want to make sure that we're providing the right services to the people that they want, and that we're doing it at the right price. So an example may be across the road here in some of the housing in Winchester City Centre, there are communal rooms that we're charging for. Now, some of those communal rooms are not used, but why are we charging for them? So we need to look at what is in each of these service charge areas and make sure that they relate to the services that people want. But on the other side of the coin, I've had tenants talk to me, and in the last few weeks I've had that when I've met them socially, saying we wish to pay more because we want better grounds, better managed grounds, and we would like them about more work done, and we're willing to pay more money. So that comes back to the tenant engagement and the point that Councillor Attrell brought up, that tenant engagement, the consumer standards groups, and the dialogue and engagement with the tenants is so important, so that we can adjust that side of it as well. But in answer to your question, we were going to full cost recovery, and but we are capping it so that we don't hit people too hard this year if there is going to be a bigger impact. And the full data is available should the committee wish to ask for it.
Thank you. I've made a note that we would like to see the service charges. So I've made a note of that. Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
In section or paragraph 11.30, it talks about the growth in demand for repairs over the last 2 years. The number of repairs has grown by 30%, and then it perhaps actually says, well, actually maybe it's only 18%, but it's either way, it's still a very significant increase in the number of repairs. Is this something we should be concerned about?
Okay. Now we're talking apples and pears. So a repair and a job are two different things. So if I look at the number of jobs that we've raised in the last year, then a significant proportion of those are service jobs. Right. So first of all, we've got to make sure that we're talking about the right numbers. So for example, I'm aware that we're counting over 5,700 jobs related to heating systems. Now, we've only got 4,500 gas boilers and heating systems in that respect. Now, many of those are, well, 4,500 of them are the servicing and gas safety certificate work. So firstly, I'd have to look in the report and see exactly which number you're talking about to answer that specific question, but you need to work out exactly what that is. Secondly, there has been an increase in the number of jobs reported, and it's very clear that the numbers have gone up, and that's for two reasons. Firstly, there has been the post-COVID impact, and that has been seen over the last 2 years in the number of jobs being reported and increased. And secondly, we are not, how do I put it, strict enough in our triage of reports that are coming in terms of, are we supposed to fix that particular problem? So to address that side of it, then there are four new policies around the service that we give in terms of repairs and maintenance that will be coming to the Cabinet Housing Committee in February, and will be available for view before that will ensure that the jobs that are being reported and the jobs that we engage in are actually the jobs that we should be doing, and that we're spending the tenants' money in the right place and not doing jobs that we should not be picking up. So there's several different aspects to that question.
Any other burning questions? No. We're about to move on to the appendix. Councillor Wallace.
Sure. Two quick points on the appendix. The two bits I noticed was a new sewage charge of £500,000 that kicks in, I think, from next year. And I wonder if that was tied in with your previous answer about sewage. And then the one-off investment drops by 1.2 million in 2026-27. That's quite a big number, so I wanted to understand that as well, please.
Could I just ask if perhaps Mr. Harlow could explain that, or Mr. Henley, on those detailed numbers?
So the sewerage charge, I believe, is 50k, not £500,000, I think. And yes, that is related to the Environment Agency charging.
Which is this appendix 1?
Sorry, that is the cost of providing the service each year that is already built into the business plan. So it's not a new pressure as such.
But it wasn't in the budget. Why wasn't it in the budget then? Because it's not showing in the budget.
If I can help with that, I believe that was not shown in the budget because the sewerage costs is nowhere near full cost recovery. And I think that's indicating the level of subsidy that the tenants are giving from across the tenant base to subsidise that sewage activity and treatment. So this is the area where we're looking to drive the full cost recovery. So it's now properly reflected in the budget.
Okay, thank you. And the other bit was on the line below, where we've got these one-off investment line, which is, I'm not sure quite what it covers, but it's 1 million this year and then 1.4 million, and then it drops to 300k. So I was just trying to understand what's happening there.
I would definitely need some help with that one, Mr. Harlow or Mr. Hendy.
Okay, so this was a one-off investment budget that was put into the business plan in 2023-24. It was put in for two purposes. One was to support the repairs and maintenance contract with procurement, and to support work on digitisation. So it was effectively £1 million a year that was put in for 24-25 and 25-26 only. And at that point, as it's one-off by nature, it won't continue into the future years.
Do we have any other questions on the appendices? No. Do we have any debate on this paper? No. Okay, so I've made a note regarding the service charges being available to us so that we can look more into that. Other than that, I feel that we've scrutinised this paper and we shall move on to the next paper on our agenda, which is the procurement of the HRA repairs and maintenance term contract. So it's recommended that this committee. Oh.
Chair, thank you. Just a housekeeping matter. Are you planning to have any small adjournment at all, or should we just go out, stretch our legs and so on at random?
I was hoping to have an adjournment at the 2-hour mark, which gives us 20 minutes.
Okay, I'll be one more paper.
So it's recommended that the committee scrutinise and comment on the proposals within the attached draft cabinet report CAB 3463, which is again going to the cabinet meeting on the 20th of November. If we could have a brief introduction, because we've got 20 minutes to our adjournment, that would be great. Councillor Westwood, and we have Gillian Knight and Jamie. Oh, no, we don't. We have Caroline Egan. No, just June. Just Gillian Knight here to support us with comments. Councillor Westwood.
And Gillian's very good at supporting the procurement action, so that'll be good. Okay, some background facts to start with. The current repairs and maintenance service carries out approximately 19,000 jobs to 5,500 homes and refurbishes around 300 void properties prior to reletting every year. Alongside the day-to-day repairs, the council invests around £14 million a year into the refurbishment and maintenance of the stock by renewing key building components and retrofitting various energy efficient measures. The R&M contract with Cardo has run for around 13 years. Much has changed in that time, and it's right to review again our requirements and to understand who we can best work with to deliver against those requirements. However, we should also recognise that we're looking to improve from a good base, with our most recent survey showing that 80% of our tenants are satisfied with our repairs and maintenance service, and 78% are happy with the timeliness of our repairs and maintenance service, but we can do better. We want Winchester City Council housing to be more easy to do business with. We recognise that we're not the easiest at times to work with. That can, however, mean different things to different people, and the report before you shows how we've consulted to understand what that means to many different groups, including tenants, staff and members. We've also engaged with major service providers to discuss areas such as best practice, scope, delivery options, IT systems and tender documentation. Finally, we've also consulted with a number of local authorities who've undertaken a similar exercise to draw on their experiences and lessons learned. There are a number of key outcomes we want to deliver. We want a partner, not a supplier. Whoever we choose going forward to represent Winchester City Council in our tenants' homes, and they should meet and deliver our values. Improve customer service and experience, including a strong digital offering and continuous customer feedback at all interactions. Thirdly, improve quality of service. Right first time is our aspiration. Fourthly, transparency and visibility for both our tenants and, importantly, internally, so that we can manage the operational processes and manage the contract effectively to best value. Thirdly, fifthly, I'll stop counting them, optimum cost and quality of repair. This is about delivering value to money for the council and to our tenants. It's not about the lowest cost. Continuous innovation to constantly improve our service and drive further value for money. And finally, the opportunity to expand our services beyond just repairs and maintenance to possibly cover planned upgrades, retrofit activity, decarbonisation of our housing stock, voids refresh, and any other services that may be identified. So the council is now undertaking the activity for a new procurement to be conducted over the next 18 to 24 months to ensure the new contract be approved by the winter of 2025, such that the selected partner can be mobilised and complete all pre-contract activity over a 4 or 5 month period and ready for the contract to start on the 1st of August 2026. It's essential the evaluation model rewards the tenderer submitting the highest quality bid at the right price. This does not mean the lowest price. The evaluation model will avoid a race to the bottom by not rewarding the lowest price with the highest marks. The contract provides opportunities for the council to drive change that will improve the standard of council-owned housing and the lives of residents, regenerate communities and tackle climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. The number of budgets into one contract over a 10-year period, how will the risks be mitigated, especially with a single contract point of failure? The Protect Commercial Limited's recommendations for the procurement strategy is to commission a term alliance contract to a single provider. Perhaps this is dangerous without contract flexibility and assurance with the best-in-class digital ways of working, including what I've already mentioned, the building information modelling for the local authority oversight, with transparent digitising decarbonisation fidelity, as I mentioned in the construction innovation paper. And disappointingly, the Protect's recommendations highlight do not highlight the importance of nature and whole life carbon considerations. So will these issues be addressed in the contract? Because obviously their omission, in my view, is alarming. And so obviously I guess that'll be in the ACA standard form of contract for term alliancing. More general points. Good to see the wider environmental considerations made clear at Paris 7. However, once again, it doesn't consider the increasing importance of rebalancing the need between mitigating climate and nature protection with adaptation resilience, as raised at full council. So can this be rectified, please? Good to see the op performance measures approach and KPIs at para 5.11 and 12. However, a set of KPIs for environmental performance and avoidance of environmental harm is missing at para 7. Can this be fixed? Comments at 7.2 and 3 are welcome. However, the procurement and contract management strategy stipulates a 10% minimum to environmental social value criteria, which to me is very worrying. I believe this is too low, especially given our declared climate and nature emergencies. A more balanced triple bottom line approach for social, economic and environmental approach, I believe, is much needed. An over focus on economic and weak environment considerations, I believe, could be self-defeating. The opportunity for the council to drive changes that will improve the standard of council-owned housing and the lives of residents, regenerate communities, and tackle climate change statements. And climate change statement is welcome at page 84 at 5.3. But again, the balanced consideration for the avoidance of harm to nature is missing. Can this be amended, please? New legislation, the PA 23 at 11, paragraph 11.34. So it's good to see we'll be keeping a watching eye on maximising public benefit in procurement. But can I ask for the para to be requalified again for the inclusion of nature-based solution considerations? I just want to stress that it's quite important to have some joined-up thinking here, as evidenced by the Office of Environmental Protection, who has significant concerns about failures to properly implement regulations designed to protect the environment, which means key environmental plans and local targets improvement will be missed. Can we address this, please? At page 88, para 7.3, we'll be seeking for bidders to provide innovative solutions to assist the council in achieving carbon neutrality for the district by 2030. I wonder if that can be explained how that will be done or what the intentions are. And page 88, the continuous improvement is a bit vague. So can we be more specific on how this will be evaluated and what weight this will be given in the procurement process? And page 82, the reputation of the council. Residents view how well the repair services run is representative of the performance of the council as a whole, as we've talked about very, very often. So how will we ensure the quality of the repairs? Is that the new clerk of works approach, which has been talked about before? And this will this be factored into our plans? And on page 88, data used to estimating the repairs and maintenance, the council will need to model should be cost based on accurate data to inform the OPM and to ensure future business plan estimates are accurate. Has this been done, or what data will be used? And finally, price per repair and price per void makes annual budgeting predictions difficult. So how will this risk be managed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Horrell?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on this item. And thank you to the officers for the consultation process that has been completed to date. And that's been really helpful, and for sharing the information and allowing some comments to date. And indeed, the 60-40 split of quality and cost proposed in the contract, I think, is a really positive indicator of what we're looking for. However, some points of clarification, Chair, that I'm sure your committee and others would be interested in understanding. Clearly, the recommendation is to put all our eggs in one basket and have a lead contractor, but this contractor is allowed to subcontract to others, particularly if they need particular skills, so there is flexibility. But how do we decide when we should take back work if work has not been completed to the right level of quality or professionalism? In 5.11, the KPIs I've been advised are currently indicative, but when will they be set and how will they be used in terms of assessing the quality of the contract and the delivery? Also, a new term for me, what is a term alliance contractor? Would you be able to provide a definition, please? Is that a legal definition? What are we actually getting into bed with, as it were, in terms of a legal entity? However, Chair, there is one absolutely fundamental question that I can't see the answer to in this paper. We're tendering for one of the biggest contracts that this council is putting into the marketplace, over 200 million over an extended period. But how are we doing that when we don't actually know how many repairs we currently do on our current 5,500 houses in our stock? At the moment, it says in the paper, approximately 19,000 repairs, a pretty bland number, an approximate number, but where is the data on how many repairs, in what areas? Is it electricity? Is it heating? Is it consistently in one house type? Is it consistently in one area? There is no information here that I've seen to date as to how that repair, those repairs break down. And for me, I don't understand how a contractor can make a reasonable bid to this council for such a substantial contract if that level of clarity is not available. Maybe it is, and maybe that is already on the table for potential bidders, but it's not clear to us as councillors interested in this very important area. And the reason why that's important is that we want to make sure that this is successful, that we do deliver good work for our residents in our homes, that we keep them up to standard, and therefore we want a very successful contract. But at the moment, I see a huge gap here, and I'd be grateful for clarity on what those numbers are, and if they're not available at this point, when will they be? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. To save me asking that question again in a little while, can I come to the room to answer that question regarding the 19,000? Mr. Hendy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We do have that information. For example, pick a trade. I can provide you the number of repairs that were done for emergency lighting, external doors, external walls last year. In total, there were 23,793 individual pieces of work done to our stock last year. So we do have all that information for the last financial year. We'll have it for this financial year, and we'll provide that information to the contractor as part of the tendering process. So just to reassure you, it does exist. It does exist in detail by trade.
Thank you. Can I just confirm then where we've got the 19,000 figure from? If, for example, last year it was 23,000 and something.
The 23,000 includes a lot of the planned work we do. So, for example, there's 5,176 items of work that were done for heating. We do, as you'll be aware, we do gas safety certification for all of our properties and check the heating. So that's all the work that's taken place at the properties. And clearly, for the contractor, we need to provide them information, all the work that's taken place, as well as the responsive work, which is a lesser number.
Thank you, Mr. Hendy. Do we have any questions on this? Councillor Reach.
Thank you. Questions about the process of the procurement, please. We propose to use a competitive dialogue procedure. That's quite a complex procedure. Are we confident in our ability to successfully procure using that? Would be our first question. Second is around the evaluation criteria. So we've gone for a 60-40 QP ratio. That's quite high on quality. Obviously, we want our tenants to have the best services possible, but there is a financial imperative here as well. How did we arrive at that figure? Is that right? And then finally, I wasn't sure what the scope would be for small and medium-sized enterprises and local businesses. to contribute to this significant amount of work, given the size of the contract and the length of the contract, and the council plan, which I think I'm right in saying includes trying to increase the amount of work we give to particularly local suppliers. So those three questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
Who would like to pick that up? Mrs. Knight, let's come to you.
Yes, the TAC1 contract is a model that is defined legally, and it will be in the contract with how we can make sure that we include local providers. They will be the overarching contractor, but there will be specialist areas that perhaps they will want to subcontract to, and that's where we want to be able to influence that we are looking at local contractors and contractors that we're currently working with, and we will of course be putting our local contractors on notice eventually that this is what we're procuring, and obviously we want to keep that good relationship, so we will where we can possibly. Yeah.
If I may, Chair, Mrs. Keys manages our procurement function, so that might be appropriate for her to comment on the skills and capability of the team.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is not new for the council. We've used competitive dialogue for other procurements in the past, so we do have experience of running that, and it's absolutely the best way to make sure, as Councillor Westwood mentioned earlier, around that partnership, to make sure that we have the right contractor to work with us in partnership rather than just somebody that we're putting work to. So yes, it's something we do have experience of using.
Thank you. Mr. Hendy?
Chair, if I could just add to that, just to give committee some reassurance, we are buying in specialist advice in relation to this, so we're not relying on our existing resources. So it mentions a very high value contract. We want to make sure we've got the best procurement advice in the country around this area, and you'll see from the report as an appendix here provided by a procurement specialist in terms of repairs and maintenance work. So we are using their advice as well.
Thank you. Sorry, just the 60/40 points as well, please.
But that is quite common for this kind of contract.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton?
Thank you, Chair. I noticed in the section at the end about other options considered and rejected, that you mention about not going down the route of multiple contractors and that sort of thing. I can see the sense of that. I wonder whether, in consultation with the consultants that you're using, whether there's any consideration for running with perhaps two for a period of time and then moving to one at some point in the future. I would have wondered whether that's considered or whether it's just bonkers to try that. Just thought I'd throw it down there.
Thank you, Chair. The approach we're taking in terms of a lead contractor is one playing to the strengths of the market. There are some very big players in the market, and they bring with them experience. They bring them significant advantages around supply chain, which are not available from smaller contractors. They also bring with them the digital solutions, which we know our customers are keen to be able to exploit in terms of managing the appointment, the process and delivery of repairs. Actually splitting it down less than one contractor runs the risk that you won't get those sort of benefits. You won't get the supply chain benefits. You perhaps won't get the level of investment in terms of the digital solutions. It's an option, but for the very reasons I said, it's one that we discounted and we're recommending a lead contractor instead.
Thank you, Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed, Mr. Hendy, all those advantages you've just given are based on the financial benefit rather than the quality benefit. I'm just conscious that we as councillors tend to only get involved with these cases when they go horribly wrong. And Mrs. Knight knows that I've got two very complex cases in my ward that have been going for most of this year, where the contractor's ability to empathise and perhaps display that element of quality that Councillor Westwood was talking about to represent this council with in front of a tenant. That's been missing quite often. I wonder how it is possible to maintain that high level. Well, first of all, identify that level of quality in a contractor, and then ensure it is maintained over the long length of contract we're talking about here.
I think through you, the important thing to recognise here is a new form of contract we're entering into, as Councillor Westwood said in his introduction. This is a partnership approach. It's not one where we're specifying work through a schedule of rates and very strict management of that with the contractor. It's something there will be regular monthly meetings with the contractor to improve performance, to resolve problems, to develop the contract. Some of the other local authorities that have taken this approach have noted that the TAC contract allows flexibility in changing the contract over that 10-year life, so that we can respond to changes in the marketplace, but also respond to changes in terms of the quality of the service. So it is quite a different approach. Hopefully it will be able to deliver the quality that clearly our customers demand. It's not purely a financially driven approach to this, but there are some financial benefits from the approach as well.
Just following on from that, was something that Councillor Horrell mentioned. If we aren't happy with the quality, do we have a break clause where we're able to get out of it? How do we decide this isn't up to scratch? Thank you, goodbye.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the report, it makes the case the contract includes the provision that we can give 6 months a notice to terminate the contract on a no-fault basis. There are no break clauses, though, on the basis clearly we would want a partner to come to this and be prepared to invest in the service over the long term, have some comfort that there's a continuation of work. But we do have the ability to terminate the contract. 6 months notice on our side. Contractor would be able to terminate the contract, giving us 12 months notice, because of course, if we're on the receiving end of it, we'd want time to re-procure the service.
Chair, may I just add to that? We've also had a discussion with the TAP board about this and had input from the residents, and I've had that input directly to me as well. And there is concern on that side about vetting of subcontractors and letting people into their homes that are not necessarily Winchester Council staff and so on. So you're raising the question, you're asking the right questions, and these need to be clearly addressed in the contract we have with the whoever is the successful bidder here, and also the operational procedures that we have in place for checking the quality of work and the service given. I've already said that we want to collect customer satisfaction at every interaction with that customer. The intention will be that if there is anything going on that we should know about, there will be a clear open channel back to this council's people for our tenants to actually feed that back. So there'll be a variety of feedback mechanisms that will be available to make sure the right things are happening, the jobs are correct, and the people are behaving in the way that we want them to behave. And then, as Mr. Hendy said, that there will be the use of the KPIs, which will highlight red, amber, green, what is going on in this business, and that data-driven approach is so important. And equally, there will be the face-to-face and monthly meetings to discuss and agree what's going on. So there's plenty of opportunity to manage this in a very effective way. And the point to remember, we had this conversation at the TAC board as well, that what we're trying to do is not look for reasons to issue the termination of the contract or so on, but we want a partner whereby we can work collaboratively on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to deliver the type of service that we want to deliver to our tenants. And those meetings are there to resolve problems, not to kick backsides and move on to another place. So those meetings are absolutely important that we get those defined correctly, and the actual commitments on both sides of the table are clear.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I guess my question is kind of follow on from that. I mean, we've clearly got the nuclear option of blowing up the contract and leaving, and we've got the other end of the scale. We've got meetings where we talk to them and say, you're not achieving your quality. Are we planning on anything in between? If, for example, we've got some nice KPIs set in, we've got some draft KPIs in the report, and it's good to see that they're showing improvement over time. But what happens if if the contractor doesn't achieve those KPIs? Do we just say, oh, that's not very good and there's nothing else we can do? Or have we actually got, has it actually got any teeth behind it, apart from throwing, just blowing up the entire contract? Because it seems like we've got, two extremes here, but maybe I'm misunderstanding. So that's part of it. And then the second bit was to follow up on Councillor Lee's point, environmental stuff. We talk about, there's a mention of environment in the report, but it's a very vague as to what we're actually doing on the environment. There's no KPIs on it. There's no, what is it we're asking our contractor to do on that? Thank you.
So 2 points there. Firstly, no, there's not going to be, blow up the contract or just accept. There will be the middle ground, and if in a certain area, then the contractor is not able to give the level of service that we want or the quality of work, then the option is there to not give that piece of work to the contractor. This is not an agreement where we give all the work to them. It gives us ultimate flexibility in being able to allocate areas of work to a specialist. We may care to pull out the gas servicing, and we may think that CCS, when they're a current provider for that particular service, may bid, and we may decide that they are the person and the people that we want in that particular area. It could be any area that we can choose to deallocate from the lead contractor, should we wish to do so. And on your second question around nature, etc., this whole contract is bounded by the wishes of this council and the council plan and the direction and what is central to everything that this administration is doing in terms of addressing climate change and the nature emergency. And that is fundamental to it. And any contractor that we engage with will need to demonstrate and commit to delivering against the aspirations of this council. How that's written into the contract, I will leave that to the experts.
Yeah, thank you, if I may. Two things, because I do understand the point being made, nuclear option of ending the contract, or under the new procurement rules, we are able to specify key KPIs that we will then provide to the government's procurement body, which will become public knowledge in terms of the operation of that contractor. Now, clearly the contractor will want to make sure that they're performing well against those KPIs, because that will affect their ability to procure work from other contracting authorities in the marketplace in the future. We want to work with them. We're coming out of this in the corner if they want to provide a good service, and clearly they want to make money out of that contract. They're a commercial organisation, but we want them to provide a good service, and they want to provide a good service as well. So hopefully that's an additional way in which we can make sure the quality of the contract and service over time is maintained. As Councillor Westwood said, this procurement process, we are lumping a lot of different work into the contract, but we're not obliged to use the contract for that work. If there are more economic or better quality options available in the marketplace, we have the ability to do that. We are giving the contractor the ability to price and make an offer for doing that work.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, thank you for that, both of you, for the answer for the KPIs. I think I'm still struggling on the environmental one. I mean, apart from everybody saying, oh, we're going to be nice and do everything properly, what do we actually, what does that actually mean? What are we actually getting people to sign up to do?
If I can ask that just for better clarification, Councillor Wallace, what is it you're specifically asking there?
So this council has a goal to get to, obviously has a goal to get to net zero in carbon emissions across the district by 2030. Everything we do contributes to that. The repairs, how we do repairs to houses contributes to that. How we power houses, how we travel to do those repairs. All of these things contribute to that goal. So is any of that written in, intended to be written into the contract?
From my perspective, yes. And I quote this contract to say the ID Verdi contract that we will be renegotiating at some stage. We're looking to reduce the carbon footprint of that area of our operation as well. The waste services, which we're yet to talk about today, where we're looking to reduce the carbon footprint of that area. The contract that we have with any organisation that's successful has to specify in exactly the same way the requirements of this council. So if we've got vans whizzing around the district, then I don't want them as diesel vans or petrol vans. I want the travel that they're doing to be carbon neutral in that respect. In terms of the materials we may use on the properties, then we've had this debate many times that we have to use the right materials that meet the building regulations and requirements. So we've talked many times about using nature-based insulation, but the fire retardantness of that is not in a specific place where we can use it at this stage. As and when we can specify those sorts of materials, then we'll bring them in.
Sorry, I was just checking with my colleague here. Great words. I get it, and it's great that we've got the aspiration to do these things. But I was just checking to see if I'm missing something. What are we actually going to put into the contract to try and drive, for example, the fact that by the end of this contract they will be using, travelling around to do repairs without in a sustainable manner.
Okay, and as you know, this is not the contract. This paper is not the contract. This paper is the vehicle to allow us to move forward to develop that contract. This is not the tender document. So the intention, my desire, is that when the officers agree this contract, it will cover the points that you're talking about.
Chair, just for clarity, that the nature of the procurement here is part of the evaluation. There'll be two aspects of the evaluation process. We'll be asking contractors their approach to the generation of carbon in terms of the work they do, sustainability in terms of the work they do, and their responses to that will be used in terms of evaluating their proposals. So we can give you comfort that it will be an essential part of what we will be seeking from the market, and it will be used to evaluate. It will be part of the quality aspect of the evaluation of the proposals from those people that bid.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that's a great thing to do at the start. But obviously, this contract could cover 15 years, which is a long time. And with the other KPIs, I was really pleased to see that we're encouraging the contractor to improve over time, and it would be great to see how a similar kind of model on some of their environmental, because nobody's perfect yet, but hopefully in 15 years we can improve.
Councillor Atchwell.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing as it's a 10-year contract, I just wanted to ask whether maybe after a year of the contract's been released, whether it comes back to a committee so we can just see how it's been going. Does it come back to this committee or do we get a report anyway?
So I guess the question there is, will it form part of some performance review or that camp housing? Where will it go back to for review?
If I can assist there, Chair, I mean, certainly some of the key indicators from this would form part of the quality matrix that Cabcom would perhaps see on their performance reporting. It could be included in the quarterly report that you routinely see. So I think we note the interest, and clearly the officer team with Councillor Westwood would find the best place to give that update. Or it could simply be a small table put in the weekly members bulletin, around performance. So I think there's lots of ways we could share that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions on the main body of this report? On any of the appendices that aren't oh no, this isn't on with the exempt, is it? Yes, no, next one. Any of the appendices, do we have any questions on? No. Do we have any debate? I don't want to stretch their legs. Okay. So I've noted down, could scrutiny see a breakdown of the jobs and the reports that were provided, if possible. Other than that, I don't have any other points particularly to note. We just wanted to understand more about that detail. Okay, so thank you for that. We will take a 10-minute break. 13 minutes. We'll come back here at 9 o'clock and then we'll carry on for a maximum of another hour. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we are now moving on to the acquisition of affordable homes at Kings Barton. Don't forget there is an exempt appendix on this, so if you wish to ask questions on that section, we'll need to go into exempt. It's recommended the committee scrutinise and comment on the proposals, CAB 3485, which is again to be considered by Cabinet on the 20th November. Introduction, Councillor Westwood, please.
Thank you, Chair. This paper seeks approval for the allocation and expenditure of new build unallocated capital budget as set out in the confidential appendix to this report to purchase land and 146 new affordable properties at Kings Barton, Winchester. The council has been successful in securing these homes in a competitive process against other interested registered providers. The proposed new housing forms part of a much larger multi-phase development by Carla at Barton Farm in Winchester. Outline planning consent for the scheme was granted on appeal by the council as local planning authority in 2011. The section 106 for the outline planning consent required a proportion of new homes to be provided as affordable. These are integrated throughout the scheme and phases in accordance with the planning consent. Acquiring Section 106 allocation in this way is currently a far more cost-effective method for the council to deliver new homes compared to direct build. This approach to housing delivery is a more efficient use of in-house resources and means that the delivery can be at scale compared to direct development of small council-owned sites. External expert advice from Savills has been taken on the price that has been agreed on and the structure of the deal. The development includes a range of affordable property types and sizes for a mixture of affordable rent and shared ownership. New homes will be built to building regulation energy efficient standards, but with the addition of air source heat pumps, thus supporting the Greener Faster Council Plan priority. As set out in the confidential appendix, the proposed purchase meets the council's approved viability tests and is based on 51 shared ownership properties and for the remaining 95 affordable rent units set at 70% market rent. There is a strong demand for new affordable housing in this location. Kings Barton is a significant site in relative proximity to Winchester city centre, where a large proportion of applicants wish to be housed. Housing register numbers have grown in recent years across all property types, highlighting a continued need for delivery of accommodation intended for providing rented accommodation and allocated via Hampshire Home Choice. The delivery of these units at Kings Barton will assist the council in satisfying demand on the housing register and provide suitable homes meeting applicants' assessed bedroom needs. Current anticipated timescales show practical completion dates over 3 phases, delivering financial years 25-26 through to 27-28. TACT has been consulted upon the allocation of funds from the New Homes Capital Programme, and they support the council providing new affordable homes throughout the Winchester district and are in support of this specific proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Councillor Lee, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a very quick statement of some questions. My concern I've already raised is about how we manage and avoid the energy gap, the poor quality of build in new acquisitions, which probably would apply to this these acquisitions. I can't see this being any different to any other development. We know that the standards out there in modern building are not to a very high standard. We really do need to avoid buying buildings that suffer high running costs for our occupants, with higher carbon emissions for our district. So how do we ensure that we can do this? How do we avoid what I call the suboptimal building regs and planning regime pitfalls that we will inherit if we don't get this right? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Horrell?
Chair, thank you for letting me raise a number of points on this important paper. And can I say our continuing aim to add new homes to our housing stock is admirable, and obviously purchasing at this point is deemed a much more financially sensible approach, so should be encouraged and supported. However, a key couple of questions. When we visit a door on the King's Barton estate, we don't want to see a different door knocker or a different letterbox. We want to ensure the same build quality for the homes that are sold as those that are being offered to us as affordable. And so can the council ensure that in this deal they are the same, they are not somehow at a lesser quality than those they're building for sale? Can we also ensure in this deal that the houses are not just put in one particular corner of the development, that they are spread across the overall estate and that they're integrated with the other properties? So a couple of key points from a contractual point of view, Chair. The other thing that I note in the risk assessment is really about the financial element and whether we believe stage payments is a sufficient level of protection, given that these houses aren't currently built. In fact, they're on future phases through the life of this particular project, this MDA, and also that that land has to be released. So importantly, do we have any financial exposure that we're concerned about, or do we think stage payments are sufficiently robust? And also, Chair, given that this is a future build programme and different phases on the King's Barton estate, is there anything from a legal point of view regarding the procurement process that we should be considering? I'm sure the 151 has looked at that, but I think they're worthy of consideration, and maybe your committee might like to ask those questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Could I just raise regarding the phased approach, why that decision's been made that Councillor Horrell's just brought up, if I may?
So just to clarify, the phased approach in terms of the phases that we're going to buy them, do you mean?
Councillor Horrell raised concerns that we're doing this phased approach and we're right out into the future for pieces of land, and is that wise?
As I understand it, then the planning consent that has been given is to deliver this in multiple phases, and we are buying properties that are in several phases, so 3 different phases, and they will be released in line with the planning consent that is in place.
And she particularly referred to the staged payments.
Okay, the stage payments and the protection was the question there of the stage payments. So we've done correct due diligence in Carla's finance position. I believe that would have been done by Mrs. Key's team, and we're satisfied that the money and the protection and the company is in a sufficiently good state that it is unlikely to go bankrupt during the time, which is the risk that we face. And if I could just pick up on making the stage payments and relate back to Councillor Horrell's question about build quality, we will have an employer's agent and a clerk of works who will be engaged on this to ensure that the build quality is as specified for us, and that the stage payments will be related to the particular phases of the build within the phases of the delivery.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I want to word this carefully so I don't step into the exempt parts of the paper. This was a welcome surprise to me when I got back from holiday. I saw it and thought, oh, this is good. And I perhaps should just remind everyone, I'm 90% of the King's Barton House King's Barton houses as they're currently set out are in the Worthies ward, of which I'm one of 3 councillors, along with Councillor Porter and Councillor Rutter. the other 10% are in St Barnabas. So Kings Barton does straddle two wards, but most of it is in my ward. I happen to, for I guess my sins or whatever, I've been asked to be chair of the Kings Barton Forum. So I live and breathe it and understand a lot of the frustrations that people have with living in a building site, living in a place where, you know, developers promise a lot of amenities and often don't deliver those amenities on the timescale that you'd expect. So I really welcome Winchester City Council making this move, and in terms of the Kings Barton thing, it's obviously important in terms of hitting the 1,000.
Sorry, did you have a question? Because you're straying.
Yeah, I realise that, but there's a bit of context to my question, which is that frustration is the lack of power that the planning authority has. And it's not a criticism of the planning authority. We have very little power to get things done to, you know, whether it's the S106s or playgrounds or other amenities. So the question is, in what way have we explored the opportunity to use the buying power that Winchester City Council has? We're making a decision to invest, and in most other relationships you would expect that you would explore what other things can you get beyond the stock taking units that you're buying. It's that, how do you build that relationship and help create a place that is more than just more than just houses, it's actually a community. So I know I took my time there, I apologise, Chair, but the context I thought was useful.
Mr. Hendy.
Chair, I'll probably be assisted by Caroline Egan. Clearly, as a housing authority, if you're minded to support this and the cabinet minded to support this proposal and we acquire these units, we would want to do what we can to ensure that it's an integral part of the community and a successful development. I think what has to be recognised, though, that this is not a buyer's market, and Councillor Westwood has already mentioned in his introduction that we had to make a bid in competition to a number of other registered providers. We have been successful in this instance. We would obviously want to use any influence we have got if we are successful in securing the units, but our ability is particularly limited in that respect. And I think the offer that's been made at the moment is an offer that, if it was conditional on anything else, and if that's what Councillor Cremoyson is indicating, then there is always the risk that CARDA would look elsewhere and look to other registered providers, and that's just a balance that needs to be struck.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on Councillor Lamey?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just like a bit of comfort. If I remember rightly, the Carla Homes planning permission was for level 4 energy efficiency. We're now looking at level 5. Will these houses be built to level 5, or will they be built to level 4?
My understanding, Councillor Laming, is that they would be built in line with the building regulations that were in place when they were given planning permission, as in any other development.
Thank you. Also, are we sure about Carla Homes themselves? Because I believe they've been put up for sale by Legal and General.
I've referred to my previous answer that the due diligence has been done by Mrs. Key's team, and we're confident that they are a viable going concern. Mrs. Keys, do you have anything to add or contradict to me?
If I start, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Caroline. Yes, we have done some due diligence on that. We've looked at the financial standing of the company, and I am content at this stage to move ahead. Clearly, before we make any payments to the company, I will reassess that, because it's a bit like an MOT certificate. It's valid on the day that you run it. But we will keep a constant close eye on Carla before we make financial commitments to them.
And if may just add in, you may be referring to the recent move from one
group company to another. The Carlin Management Limited, who are the company we'd be transacting with, are within that structure, but they're not the company that have recently been sold.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
I had a similar question. So just keeping on that point, do you look at their clients and at-risk projects that they might have on their books that could cause problems financially for them down the line? Or is it just at their own report and accounts you're looking at? Is it top level?
So we use an external company that takes into account financial information that is available on any particular company that we're running a report on. So they will look at a wide range of indicators. Whether that is one of them, I don't have that detail with me at the moment. But yeah, we don't do all of it in-house just by looking at sets of accounts. We pay for a consultancy firm to do that for us.
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I had a question. If the council's buying all these properties, which we're going to use for our social housing, does this mean there'll be a shortage of affordable homes for those trying to get their first step on the housing ladder in Winchester? And if so, should the council be driving the building of more affordable homes in our local plan?
From my perspective, Councillor Wallace, and I'm no expert in some of those areas that you've just talked about there, then Arla in this development are obliged to deliver a number of affordable homes under Section 106 agreement, and those affordable homes are available for purchase by this council and any other registered provider that provide affordable homes to the marketplace. Your question really goes back to the local plan going forwards, and we all know the position of the current local plan, and we all know that the local plan may need further work on it, depending on the government's response to the NPPF, and at that stage, then more homes may need to be built in this district. The route forward is to build more homes. You're quite right, and but we are bound by what we need to deliver. So it is a planning question. I understand that, and I'm not the planning member who's sitting behind me, but I'm sure that was a conversation you can have outside of this forum.
Councillor Grimmoyson, just a question this time, please.
Of course. Will the council homes that we purchase be liable to pay the management fees, such as ground rent and maintenance and all the garden stuff, to the management company Anthem in the same way as those people who have private homes and the shared ownership homes, or are they on a different basis? That would be interesting to know that.
Yeah, we have included a management fee within our appraisal. So yes, affordable rent and shared ownership tenures will need to contribute to that, much like a service charge.
Do we have any other questions on the non-exempt part? I just wanted to ask, it has been spoken about many times in many different places about the speed at which the homes at Kings Barton have actually been delivered versus what was predicted. Do we have confidence that these will actually be delivered in the time frame we're hoping they will? And do we have any comeback, any sway over if they do not, then X?
Yeah, so we have target golden brick and completion dates within the contract, and there will be mechanisms to enable us to enforce those. And if they're not complied with, then they'll be essentially, we'll have different abilities. It's quite a commercial question in some ways, but there'll be different ways in which we can step in or have various penalties if they're not delivered to the timescales that are within the contract that we sign.
Thank you. Does anybody have any exempt questions on the exempt section? That's much easier. Okay, does anybody have any other questions on this before we go to debate? No? Do we have any debate on this paper? Councillor Grimison.
But not. But firstly, I want to say, overall, I'm really pleased that the City Council is making this move and investing in Kings Barton. I think it's a vote of confidence, and I hope that I hope we can use our influence in soft ways to bring forward some of those amenities faster than Carlo would otherwise do. But I also see the benefit of having City Council homes in that area as a way of influencing the way in which the other housing associations operate and helping to build that community. So overall, I think it's a very positive thing, and it's good to see the City Council taking the opportunity to use its strategic advantages to make this move at this point when the cycle is such that building your own homes is not particularly attractive. So on balance, great, but please understand that there are a lot of frustrations there about the speed at which those amenities are coming through, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will skip item 9A because we don't need it. Going on to item 10 of the agenda, the future of waste and recycling. So we all had our member briefing that Campbell thoroughly took us through everything, and we were all able to ask questions. So I'm hoping this should be a relatively pain-free item. Councillor Learning will be introducing with Mr. Williams, and I can't read the writing. Kirsten Shaw. Thank you. To this it looked like Shan, and I thought that doesn't sound right. Over to you, Councillor Learning, for a brief introduction, please.
Thank you. As you said, Chairman, we have had a member briefing on this, so I don't feel the need to comprehensively introduce it, particularly given in light of the time of the evening. This paper does set out the proposals for the introduction of food waste collection, covering the budget, the proposed phasing with a start from next October. We are already undertaking the vehicle procurement required, but we do need to look at acquiring appropriate bins and caddies, and we need to find space for our new food waste vehicles when they arrive. The introduction of food waste collection will significantly reduce residual waste, which currently goes for incineration, which has, as you know, become recently very controversial. And will lead to a considerable carbon saving. We are keen to move forward with this sooner rather than later, but in a pragmatic way which does not incur excessive costs. The question was asked earlier on about whether we've done cost benefit analysis. We have done an options appraisal on the different ways in which we could deliver this, and the proposed phased rollout running from October through to before the legal requirement to introduce the service by the end of March 2026. This is the most pragmatic way of doing it. By phasing it, we bring forward our carbon reduction. It makes it much easier to train and recruit staff. It allows the distribution of bins in a sensible way. I recently was in Cornwall, where the delivery of new bins several months before they were needed caused huge amounts of confusion and bins piled in streets everywhere. So we do need to get this right and make sure that we have residents supportive of our service from the beginning. This is an incredibly significant change for our residents, and I think it is very important that we get it right.
Okay, So we will have Councillor Lee in a moment to come up and speak to us. So again, it's recommended that the committee scrutinise and comment on the proposals, and again, it's going to the meeting of the 20th of November, and it's cab 3475. Councillor Lee, would you like to join us and say your piece?
Thank you, Chair. The costs of this service have been touched on in terms of being a little concerning, especially when mapped, in my mind, to carbon nature crisis value benefits compared with other potential projects. And I do understand the legal, national and procurement reasons for introducing the service and the implications of this programme. However, there are many studies that show that food waste collection and other improvements to waste collection services save less carbon emissions than other greener and more valuable, faster carbon reduction programs and projects. So, given our financial woes, if an option becomes available to change course, despite the obvious benefits, would we grab it? There are bigger carbon environmental benefits from alternative decarbonisation programs and project choices. I'd like to stress it's not a case of not supporting this need. It is simply a case of higher pressing priorities for better decarbonisation and reducing wider environmental harm avoidance to the council and the district benefits are available. I also remain concerned that without a local area energy plan and electrification programme for our busy waste collection fleet, for air quality and climate nature crisis reasons, we might be making premature decisions, especially over the depot location for vehicles. So could I ask for scrutiny to consider those concerns and factor that into your thinking? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Okay, does anybody have any questions on the main body of the paper, pages 189 to 219? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. I always love your papers, Campbell, and I always love the waste papers. They're great fun. No, I'm excited to see what's going to happen here. And it was great to read about all the activities that are happening and in preparation for this. So I was really positive about that. But my questions are really to do about costs, because I was rather concerned about seeing what's happening to the costs. So it was only in February that we added 1.4 million. This council approved 1.4 million pounds per year for the service. 400k per year for other changes and 130k for implementation. And the costs are shooting up since then. So we've seen a 20% increase in the recurring costs, and one-off increase in costs appeared to have increased by about £500,000. So this is obviously worrying. For the recurring costs, much of the increase is being attributed to inflation, which is confusing as there's been no change to the start date of the service. Another 70k has been attributed to HVO costs when 200k was allocated in February. I'm confused. Have we got our hands round what's going on here? Because I'm nervous.
Thank you. As was already referred to, this is a service which we are legally required to introduce. When we were initially looking at budgets, it was very much around the amount of money that we were receiving from government, and it obviously has taken further work and research to actually bottom out what all of those costs are going to be. I will hand over to Kirsten and Campbell, and Kirsten was smiling when you were congratulating Campbell on his fine report. So I think we need to give Kirsten a clap for excellent reporting.
Yes, I would agree with that. So Kirsten's played a very major part in writing this. I think, as Councillor Lerny said, this is a national programme which we have to do. I think also really importantly, this isn't it in terms of waste and recycling. So in terms of carbon savings and environmental improvements, we've recently carried out the reroute of rounds, which has had a saving. Food waste is a further saving. We're then on track to introduce recycling of pots, tubs, trays and cartons, which will be another saving. And so all of those together will have a really quite significant change going forward on our environment, which is really positive. And food waste is a part of that. I think in terms of the finances, some of the things like HVO, for example, that you referred to, that was referring to the cost of HVO for the existing fleet, which is now running on hydrotreated vegetable oil, with the associated carbon savings. The additional money in here is HVO for the food waste trucks, rather than an additional fee for what we'd already agreed. And I think some of the other costs are related to clearer estimates of the number of houses which we're likely to have when we start this programme. So the food waste service runs on a cost per household basis, which is subject to inflation and subject to the number of houses that we have. And since we started the contract with BIFA in 2021, we've gone from just over 55,000 houses. We're now on 58,500 houses, and it's scheduled to be up to just over 60,000 houses by the time we start doing this across the piece in April 2026. So I think all the costs are explained and set out in the report, but I take all the points about this being really exciting and a big step forward, because I think it does really offer some opportunities. I think the other thing I'd like to say is, whilst a lot of the stuff in the paper is about the infrastructure and the bins and the caddies and the vehicles, one of the things we got from the member briefing we've done recently was about how what's really important about this is engaging residents and communicating this properly. And that's, I think, something which we're really keen to drive forward, so that as well as making sure we buy the right vehicles and the right bins and we have the right costs, we really engage with people to make sure that this rolls out well and we do it really well from the start.
Yeah, just to follow, I get the points, and I read the report very thoroughly to understand why the costs have gone up, but I wasn't expecting, as I expected that what we agreed in February was going to be the cost, and it was a big shock to me to see these big cost increases less than a year later. I mean, that's if we'd known this, if we'd signed off 1.6 million in February, I think nobody would have batted an eyelid. But signing off 1.4 and then increasing to 300k a few months later is not expected. Is it still reasonable to assume that government will fund 80% of the cost of running the service, given that our recurring costs are going up? I mean, we've got an assumption in there that the government's going to fund maybe around 80% of the cost, but obviously since we made that assumption back in February, our costs have gone up 20%. So when we've just linearly increased, the government, and the government's now going to make a lot more. Is that a reasonable assumption, or are we going to come back here in a few months' time and find that costs have gone up again?
That's our current assumption. I was on a meeting with DEFRA, as were a lot of other local authorities, earlier this afternoon. DEFRA are shortly going to announce how much money that will be, and they're also shortly going to announce how much transitional funding we will get in order to start doing the food waste service, so things like procurement and communications. So we're going to get that announced very shortly, as well as the funding which we'll get for extended producer responsibility. So our assumptions in here, about 80% funding from that, are the best we have at the moment. Clearly, if it's a higher amount or a small amount, we can reflect that in terms of how we move forward, but that's our ongoing assumption at the moment.
I just wanted to add in, I think this is just one example of many areas where we have uncertainty around our funding of all of our services, but particularly in relation to the new burden of taking on this new service. So the 80% assumption was our assumption internally. It wasn't an indication that the government gave of the proportion of funding that they would provide for the service. So it's our working assumption at the moment, and we will keep a close eye on it, and we wait for confirmation of that in the same way we wait for confirmation of all of our funding going forward.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on this paper? Councillor Grimes.
Yeah, particularly interested in the item explaining how Biffa will be given full use of the depot at Barfield Close. Can you just shed a bit of light as to what they need that extra space for? Is it about management of vehicles and staff, or is it about emptying out food waste and then, I don't know, doing stuff to it? Because the latter would obviously create some concerns around potential health risks and rats and all that sort of thing. So it'd be good to get clarity on that so that we can hopefully reassure people. Thank you.
Yes, so the way the service would operate is that none of the food waste would go back to the depot at the moment. It would all go to a transfer station, the main one being in Otterbourne, where Hampshire County Council's partner Veolia would take it away. The reason for the increased use of space for Biffa at the depot would be because there's another 9 food waste vehicles. There's a need for the additional vehicles to support them and the staff, so the drivers and the loaders, to manage those. So there is no intention that the food waste goes back to the depot and sits there overnight. In fact, legally, it's not allowed to by planning permission, and it doesn't have the right regulations in order for it to do that. So, in terms of the neighbours, no, there'd be it's basically just to allow the additional 9 food waste trucks that we would have there to operate safely.
Any other questions? Councillor Bathy.
Yes, I'd just like to look at the table in 2.7. You just mentioned there about the depot at Bar End, but the costs associated there to a Winnell site in terms of fit out and the oil interceptor. What facilities are we anticipating then at Winnell for the fulfilment of the food waste contract?
There would be no facilities at Winnell for food waste. That's to enable Biffa to operate out of the depot on their own. And IDV, our grounds maintenance and street cleansing contractor, would then operate out of the depot that we're securing in Winnell. So there's no food waste service or operation out of the Winnell facility, which we're looking to secure.
Councillor Wallace. Sorry, did you want to come back?
I did. Oh, I was just seeking clarification then. Why is there information that the sort of costs associated with that in what is, I understand, to be the food waste contract rather than the ID Verde contract?
So the reason we're putting that in there, because one of the consequences of having the additional food waste trucks is we need to put them somewhere, which comes at cost. So we looked at a range of different options, and the best option we've got at the moment is moving IDV out in their entirety, putting Biffa on one site, and therefore there's a cost to moving Biffa to the location up in Winnell. IDV to the location of it.
Councillor Wallace, now it's really you.
Different area. So one of the other things that this report brings to the fore is that the other waste recycling is not going to hit our government goal of April 2026, for which I understand, and for lots of good reasons we don't need to go into all of those. But we're not going to hit those dates. When are we planning to tell residents that we're not going to achieve those dates, or is this it?
If I can answer that, certainly the Liberal Democrats have been telling people that for a while. In our local leaflets, it is a county issue because it is county that need to provide the facilities. We could collect pots, tubs and trays tomorrow if we only had somewhere which could take them. This is something where we will need to explain it to people because they will be expecting the simpler recycling to be delivered across the whole country as of the 1st of April 2026. And unfortunately, our recycling facilities in Hampshire are just not there yet.
So is that down to us are we saying that's down to us councillors to individually
This is
go
where
out?
your
and,
interest of the county councillor comes very much into play, Councillor Wallace, because we need all of our county councillors to be pushing really hard on this and encouraging county to accelerate progress. We have been waiting months for a meeting where county will actually tell us as districts when they're going to have the recycling facilities ready and what decisions they've made about how they want us to collect waste, because that may well have a material influence on how we need to deliver our recycling service going forwards. And right now we're just operating in a vacuum.
I kind of get that side of it, and there's work needs done there, and I think they're suffering in the same way that Winchester is suffering from the lack of guidance from government for quite some time. But I'll take your point, and I will take that back. But in terms of communicating to our residents, is that, I mean, do you see that as a county council thing, a Winchester council thing, or individual councillor thing? Because I mean, we're talking in the report here, we're talking about around about a year or more, it sounds like, delay.
At least, I would say. I think it's a Project Integra thing, so I think it does need to be done jointly between the districts and both county and Southampton and Portsmouth as our other partners in Project Integra. But certainly, as part of our communications about the introduction of food waste, I think we will have to be clear to people that those other changes that they're expecting are going to be delayed. But I think we'll have to look at how we deliver that in a sensible way. While I'm attacking the county right now for obviously not having made those decisions, I think it is really important that as far as residents are concerned, we're giving a joint clear message about what's happening.
Any further questions on this paper? No, any debate? No, I haven't taken any points away from this for us to note down, so thank you for your scrutiny on this one. We're going to skip to Q2, item 11, Q2 finance performance monitoring, because I don't think we'll be able to do it justice. So on to item 12, to note the latest work programme for this committee. Is everybody happy to note that? You'll see that February we have a busy agenda. It's sort of almost mirror imaging the November one. And of course, if we have any additional papers coming to that, I will of course work with officers as best we can to try and separate that out into two separate meetings. Unfortunately, we weren't able to this time. So item 13, to note the latest forward plan of key decisions. Are we happy to note the forward plan of key decisions? Thank you. So thank you for your engagement and for being concise. And I'm sorry if you felt some of it was a bit hurried, but I think we did it all due diligence. So thank you. Safe drive home.